My own son threw me off a train in the middle of a storm. 2 weeks later, I signed away my vineyard for $6.1 million. I never thought the day would come when my own flesh and blood would see me as a burden. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I'd share. And if, for 1 second, any of this feels familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening my soul. My name is Eleanor Miller. I'm 64 years old, and for over 30 years, I was a single mother in the rolling hills of Sonoma County. I raised my 2 sons, Tom and Ryan, with hands split open from working the land, with a back bent under the Californian sun, and with a heart broken by so many silent sacrifices. My 20-acre vineyard was everything I had to give them: tradition, history, and the sweat of 3 generations of Millers who had loved that land more than their own lives. Every morning at 5:30, I'd wake to the sound of my old brass alarm clock, the same one my father used, fix myself a weak black coffee in the kitchen with its chipped terracotta tiles, and step out onto the patio in my worn rubber boots. The air smelled of jasmine and damp earth, and I'd check each vine as if it were a sick child. My hands, wrinkled and stained with soil, knew every leaf, every branch, every cluster that promised a good harvest. But my sons saw something else when they looked at me. They saw an old-fashioned woman, clinging to methods they considered obsolete, a stone in the shoe of their modern ambitions. Tom, my eldest at 35, worked for a construction firm in San Francisco, and always came home in wrinkled suits with the impatient look of someone in a hurry to change everything he touched. Ryan, 32, sold insurance in Sacramento and only showed up when he needed money or when his wife, Jessica, sent him to check on the old lady. The morning that changed my life forever started like any other. With the phone ringing at 7 a.m., it was Tom, and his voice had that demanding tone he'd adopted since he started making real money. "Mom, we need to have a serious talk about the vineyard." I was standing in the kitchen, holding my coffee mug with both hands to keep them from shaking. Through the window, I could see the rows of vines my father had planted in 1968, when I was just a little girl running barefoot between them. "What's wrong, son?" "What's wrong is you can't keep using methods from the Dark Ages. The world has changed, Mom. We have to modernize this whole operation, or we're going to go bankrupt." I sighed, holding back the anger I had learned to swallow for decades. "Tom, this isn't just a business. It's our heritage. Your grandfather and I have cared for this land with love, with respect." He cut me off with a dry laugh that chilled me to the bone. "Love? Respect? Mom, you have no idea how business works in the 21st century. You're an old woman standing in the way of progress. If it weren't for you and your sentimentality, we'd have been rich years ago." The mug slipped from my hands and shattered on the red tile floor. Coffee spread like a dark stain, mixing with the tears that began to stream down my cheeks. "Standing in the way?" "Yes, Mom. You're in the way, a big way. That's why tomorrow you're getting on a train with me. I have a meeting with an investor who actually knows what he's doing. Serious people who can turn this place you've let wither on the vine into something real." He didn't say Mom with affection. He spat it out like a curse. That night, I didn't sleep a wink. I sat in the wicker rocking chair on the patio, the same one where I'd nursed my sons as babies, where I'd read them stories when they had nightmares, where I'd comforted them when they fell off their bikes. The full moon lit up the vines, and I could hear the wind whispering through the leaves, as if the land itself was talking to me, consoling me, reminding me who I was before I became the old lady in the way. My hands trembled as I held the framed portrait of my father. In the photo, his hands were caked with dirt, and he wore a proud smile. His eyes shone with the satisfaction only known by those who have built something with their own hands, who have watched what they sowed with love and patience grow. "Dad, where did I go wrong?" I whispered to the photograph. "I just wanted them to have something decent, something of their own, but it seems that in trying, I raised them without a soul." The wind rustled the curtains in the living room, and for a moment, I felt as if my father was answering me, as if he were telling me that love is never a mistake, even when it hurts, as if he were reminding me that I had given everything I had, and that was no small thing. At dawn, I packed my suitcase with trembling hands. I put in my favorite scarf, the one my mother knitted for me before she died, with yarn she'd bought at the old farmer's market, a folder with all the vineyard's deeds which I thought Tom would respect, and a photo of my parents the day they bought this land. I also packed a small vial of soil from the vineyard, without really knowing why. Maybe because I sensed it was the last time I'd be in my home. During the Amtrak ride to San Francisco, while Tom talked on his phone as if I didn't exist, my mind traveled back 30 years, to all the times I had sacrificed my own dreams for theirs. I remembered when Tom was 8 and broke his arm falling out of the big oak tree in the yard. I sold my pearl necklace, the only valuable gift my mother had ever given me, to pay for a private specialist because our insurance had a 3-month waiting list for an orthopedist. "It's for my boy," I told the local jeweler, who looked at me with pity as he weighed the pearls on his old scale. The money was barely enough, but Tom healed perfectly, without even a scar to remind him of my sacrifice. When he turned 18, he wanted to study at a private university on the East Coast. "Mom, all my friends are going to good schools. I can't stay here like some country bumpkin," he'd said with that teenage arrogance that broke my heart. I mortgaged 5 acres of the vineyard, the best ones, the ones that produced the sweetest grapes, to pay for his 4-year degree, his dorm, and all the whims of a city boy who was ashamed of his farmer mother. During those years, I ate canned soup 4 days a week and patched my clothes until they were more patched than fabric. But when Tom called asking for money for textbooks, a new laptop, or to go out with his important classmates, I always found a way to send it. I worked from sunrise until my hands bled, sold olives at the Sunday market, and even cleaned houses in the early morning to make extra money. "It's an investment in his future," I'd tell myself as I counted coins on the kitchen table, calculating if I had enough for his expenses and mine. His future was always more important than my present. It was the same with Ryan. When he married Jessica, they needed money for a down payment on a condo in Sacramento. "Mom, we can't rent forever. Jessica deserves something of her own, something nice," he explained with those eyes he'd inherited from his father, my late husband Anthony, who died when the boys were little and left me alone with everything. I sold the parcel with the century-old olive trees, the ones that produced the best oil in the whole county, to give them the down payment for their 3-bedroom condo with a view of the river. Jessica never thanked me. She never invited me to see the house I had paid for. I just got a photo on my phone with the message, "We're all moved in. Thanks, Eleanor." Not even mom-in-law, just Eleanor. When their first son, my grandson Alex, was born, I thought I would finally have a family that valued me. I got my hopes up, imagining afternoons with cookies, bedtime stories, being the grandma with hidden sweets in her purse. But Jessica had other ideas. "Eleanor, the baby needs stability, routines. It's better if we schedule the visits," she told me the first time I showed up unannounced with an almond cake I'd been baking since 4 in the morning. "You understand, right? It's for the good of the child." The good of the child never included time with me, only my money for his private preschool, his extracurriculars, his beach vacations that I paid for but was never invited to. When Alex turned 5, I sent him a beautiful gift, a hand-carved wooden rocking horse made by a local artisan, the same kind of toy his father and uncle had played with. Jessica called me, annoyed. "Eleanor, the boy already has too many toys. Next time, it would be better if you just gave me the money and I'll buy something more appropriate." Appropriate meant expensive and soulless. Last year, for my 63rd birthday, I decided to make a special dinner. I bought fresh shrimp from Monterey Bay, made my famous gazpacho, roasted a lamb with herbs from the garden, and set the table with the embroidered tablecloth that had been my grandmother's. I called my sons 3 days in advance to invite them. Tom said, "Mom, I've got a golf game with clients. It's important for business. We'll celebrate some other time." Ryan was more creative. "Jessica has a migraine and the kid has a fever. We can't leave the house. But happy birthday, huh?" I ate alone, looking at the 3 empty place settings I had laid out with hope. The lamb grew cold, the gazpacho lost its crispness, and I ate a tear with every bite. At midnight, after I had cleaned everything up and washed the dishes no one had used, I got a text from Tom. "Happy B-Day, Mom. Have a good year." Not even a call. Just an automated message his phone probably reminded him to send. But what hurt the most was last December, when I fainted in the middle of the vineyard. I'd been pruning since 7 in the morning under a sun that didn't respect old age, and suddenly everything went black. I woke up on the ground, my face covered in dirt, my body shaking. I managed to drag myself back to the house and call Ryan with trembling hands. "Son, I fainted. I think I need to see a doctor." "Oh, Mom. What did you do now?" "Look, I can't come. I'm at a really important business lunch. But I'll tell Jessica to come check on you, okay?" Jessica arrived 3 hours later, looking annoyed and checking her watch every 5 minutes. "Eleanor, it's probably just the heat. Take some ibuprofen and rest. It's not a big deal." It wasn't the heat. It was the high blood pressure I'd been ignoring for months because I didn't have the money for specialists, and the local clinic had a 2-month wait for an appointment. But Jessica was in a hurry to get back to her important life, so I was left alone with my dizziness and my fear. For all these years, I had believed I was building a united family, that my sacrifices were seeds of love that would blossom when my children matured. I thought that if I gave them everything I never had, if I cleared every path that had been closed to me, they would love and value me when I was old. But now, sitting on this train as Tom continued his phone call as if I were a piece of luggage, I began to understand something terrible. I had raised 2 men who saw my love as a given, my money as their birthright, and my presence as an inconvenience to be tolerated. "Yeah, the old lady is with me," he was saying into the phone. "Don't worry, we'll know how to handle her." The old lady? Handle her? For the first time in 30 years, I wondered if I had made the biggest mistake of my life, loving without limits those who knew nothing of love or limits. The train sped through the California countryside as I watched the fields of sunflowers stretching to the horizon. There was something hypnotic in the motion, in the rhythmic sound of the wheels on the rails, but my peace was shattered when I heard Tom speaking in a low voice, thinking I couldn't hear him. "Listen, Arthur. The woman is very attached to her traditions, but it's pure ignorance. She knows nothing about profitability, international markets, nothing that's useful in the real world." My stomach clenched. "Arthur? Who was Arthur?" "Yeah, she's my mother," he continued, his voice even lower. "But you have to understand, she's spent her whole life playing farmer without a clue. She's a lucky peasant, nothing more. The land is worth a fortune, but she's wasting it with those 50-year-old techniques." Every word was a slap in the face. I clutched the purse in my lap, where I kept all the deeds, all the documents that proved that land was mine, earned with the sweat of 3 generations of millers. "Don't worry, we've already spoken with the lawyer. Everything's ready. We just need her to sign where we tell her. And believe me, she will. She knows she has no other choice." "Sign what? What was my son talking about?" "Perfect. Yes, the advance is confirmed. $200,000 as we agreed. As soon as we have her signature, the rest of the money will be transferred directly to our accounts." I couldn't breathe. I literally felt as if someone had pulled a plastic bag over my head. Our accounts? What advance? What money was he talking about? "No, don't worry about her. She's an old woman, she trusts her sons. She'll never suspect a thing. And even if she did, what's she going to do? Hire a lawyer? She can't afford one. We've bled her dry over the years. We've bled her dry." Those 4 words pierced me like knives. I understood, in that horrible, crystal-clear moment, that every time they had asked for money, every emergency, every investment, every gift for my grandson, had been part of a plan to leave me without resources, without options, without escape. Exactly. No savings, no assets she can sell, nothing. All she has left is the vineyard, and that's exactly what we need. The call ended, and Tom turned to me with a smile I could no longer see as my son's. It was the smile of a stranger, of someone who had been planning my ruin for years, while I cooked him his favorite meal on Sundays and ironed his shirts when he came to visit. "Are you okay, Mom? You look pale." "I'm fine," I lied, though I felt the world crumbling beneath my feet. "Good, because we're almost there, and I need you to behave yourself when we're with Arthur. He's a very serious investor, with a lot of money, and he can't see you hesitating or objecting. Understand?" I nodded because I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up as if I were choking. When we arrived at the station, An elegant man in his 50s was waiting with a sign that said, Miller. He was tall, well-dressed, with an expensive watch that gleamed under the platform lights. This had to be Arthur. Mrs. Miller, he said with a businesslike smile. It's a pleasure to meet you. Your son has told me so much about you. I was sure he had, but I didn't know exactly what Tom had told him, though I was starting to get the picture. We got into his car, a black BMW that smelled of new leather and expensive air freshener. During the drive, Arthur explained his investment proposal in a language full of technical terms he clearly expected me not to understand. You see, Eleanor, the artisanal wine market is booming internationally. We have contacts in the US, in Japan, in Germany. But to compete in those markets, we need to completely modernize production. What kind of modernization? I asked, though I already knew I wouldn't like the answer. Well, first, we'd have to rip out all the old vines. They're very picturesque, but their yield is too low. We'd replace them with high-yield hybrid varietals. My heart stopped. The old vines were the ones my father had planted. Some were over 60 years old, with deep roots that had survived droughts, frosts, and pests. They were my family's history, turned into wood and leaves. Then we'd install automated irrigation systems, stainless steel tanks, state-of-the-art German machinery. We'd turn your little family winery into an efficient industry. And what part would I play in all this? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Tom and Arthur exchanged a look they didn't bother to hide. Well, Eleanor, you would be, let's say, the honorary chairwoman. Your name would be on the labels, of course. Eleanor Miller Vineyards, a family tradition since 1968. Sounds great for marketing. Marketing. My life turned into a marketing slogan. But the day-to-day management, the technical decisions, the business negotiations, we would handle that. People with experience in international markets. And financially? Oh, you wouldn't have to worry about a thing. We'd pay you a fixed monthly stipend. $1,500. For a woman your age, living alone, that's more than enough. $1,500. For land worth millions. For a lifetime of work. For the legacy of 3 generations. When we arrived at the lawyer's office, I sat in a brown leather chair facing a desk piled with documents. The lawyer, a bald man with thick glasses, explained the papers in a monotone voice, as if reading a grocery list. In short, Mrs. Miller, you retain nominal ownership of the land, but you cede all rights of exploitation, commercialization, and management to the company formed by your son Tom and Mr. Arthur Vance. For how long? 99 years renewable. 99 years? Basically, forever. And in the event of your passing, these rights are automatically transferred to the company's heirs, not your family heirs. I stared at the documents. Pages and pages of fine print that basically said, Eleanor Miller gives up everything her life has been in exchange for $1,500 a month and the honor of seeing her name on a pretty label. Do you need time to think about it? The lawyer asked. No, Tom said before I could answer. My mother and I have discussed everything. She's ready to sign. I looked up at my son. His eyes were cold, calculating. There wasn't a trace of the little boy who used to run through the vines chasing butterflies, of the teenager who brought me wildflowers on his way home from school, of the young man who hugged me and said, "Thanks, Mom," when I sent him money for his studies. The man in front of me was a stranger who had come from my womb, who had nursed at my breast, who had slept in my bed when he had nightmares, but who now looked at me as if I were an obstacle to be removed. I picked up the pen with a trembling hand. I held it over the paper for a few seconds that felt like hours. And then, something inside me broke. Not my heart. That had been broken for a while. Something deeper, more structural, broke. The invisible chain that had bound me to the idea that I had to sacrifice myself for my children, even if they despised me, snapped. I dropped the pen on the table. I'm not signing. The silence in the office was so thick I could hear the wall clock ticking. Everyone stared at me as if I'd spoken in a foreign language. Tom was the first to react. His face turned red, and the vein in his forehead that used to pop out when he threw tantrums as a child began to bulge. What do you mean you're not signing? Mom, have you lost your mind? I stood up slowly, clutching my purse to my chest like a shield. My legs were shaking, but my voice came out firmer than I expected. I haven't lost my mind, Tom. For the first time in years, I'm completely sane. Arthur cleared his throat uncomfortably and glanced at his expensive watch. Mrs. Miller, perhaps you need a moment. It's normal to feel a certain emotional attachment. Emotional attachment? The words came out like I was spitting poison. Is that what you call not wanting to give away my life's work for $1,500? Tom moved toward me with that intimidating posture he used when he didn't get his way. Mom, don't be ridiculous. $1,500 is more money than you've seen at one time in your life, and you don't have to do anything but cash the checks and keep quiet. Cash the checks and keep quiet, I repeated, tasting the bitterness of the words. Like some burdensome pensioner. Exactly, because that's what you are. An old woman who knows nothing about the modern world and is ruining an opportunity that won't come again. The lawyer coughed nervously and began gathering the papers on his desk. Perhaps it would be best if the family discussed this in private. There's nothing to discuss, I interrupted. I'm leaving. I walked out of the office, feeling their eyes on my back. I knew Tom would follow, and sure enough, before I reached the elevator, I heard his hurried footsteps on the marble floor. Mom, wait! I turned to face him. I was no longer the submissive woman who had entered that building an hour ago. Something fundamental had changed in me, like a broken bone that heals wrong and ends up stronger at the fracture point. What do you want, Tom? I want you to see reason. Look, I know this was a shock, but think about it rationally. What are you going to do? Keep playing farmer until you die? Live in that house that's falling apart? Working land that produces less every year? It's my house. It's my land. But you don't have the money to maintain it. Last month you had to take out a loan for the pruning equipment. The year before, you sold the big olive parcel to pay the property taxes. How long do you think you can keep this up? He was right, and he knew it. He also knew why I had no money. Because for 30 years I'd been giving it all to him and his brother. That's my problem, I said. No, Mom. It's everyone's problem. Because when you die, Ryan and I are going to inherit a ruin full of debt, and we're not going to let that happen. You're not going to let it happen. His eyes glittered with a coldness that froze my blood. No, one way or another, that land is going to be profitable. With or without your signature. It was a threat. My own son was threatening me. The drive back to Sonoma was a nightmare. Tom drove in silence, his jaw tight, his hands gripping the steering wheel as if it were my neck. I looked out the window at the fields I knew by heart, wondering how I had gotten to this point, how I had raised a man capable of looking at me as if I were his enemy. When we got home, my heart sank when I saw Ryan's car parked in the driveway. I knew Tom had called him, that a family ambush was waiting for me. Ryan was sitting at the kitchen table with Jessica at his side. She had that morally superior expression she always wore when she thought she had to explain something to me for my own good. My grandson Alex, 5 years old, was playing on the floor with a toy car, oblivious to the drama unfolding above his head. "Hi, Mom," Ryan said without getting up. "Tom told me what happened." "I'm sure he did," I replied, hanging my purse on the hook by the door. Jessica cleared her throat as if about to give a rehearsed speech. "Eleanor, we understand it's difficult to accept change at your age, but sometimes the people who love us most have to make decisions for us when we can no longer think clearly." "Excuse me? What Jessica means," Ryan intervened, "is that we've all noticed you've been different lately. More confused, more forgetful. It's normal at 64. I stared at them, incredulous. Confused? Forgetful? I could recite every household expense, every payment due date, every detail of the Vineyard's management from memory. "I'm not confused," I said slowly. "I'm awake. For the first time in years, I'm wide awake." Tom sat down next to his brother, forming a united front against me. "Mom, we've been talking. We think you need help. Medical help, I mean." "Medical help? There are some very nice assisted living facilities in the Bay Area," Ryan continued. "Places where you'd be cared for, where you'd have company your own age, where you wouldn't have to worry about a thing. Facilities." The word hung in the air like a death sentence. They wanted to lock me away. They wanted to declare me incompetent, put me in a home, and take my land without even paying the miserable price Arthur had offered. Just temporarily, Jessica added in the syrupy voice she used with Alex when explaining why he couldn't have candy before dinner. Until you feel better. Until you get your mental clarity back. My mental clarity is perfect, I said, feeling rage begin to boil in my stomach. The problem is that for the first time, I'm using it to see who you really are. Mom, don't be ridiculous, Tom snapped. We know you love us and we love you, but sometimes love means making tough decisions. Just then, Alex left his toy car and came over to me. His big dark eyes looked at me with curiosity. Grandma Ellie, why is everyone mad at you? My heart shattered. It was the first time in months anyone in my family had asked me how I felt, even if it was a 5-year-old who didn't understand the situation. I knelt to his level and caressed his cheek. They're not mad at me, sweetheart. They're mad because Grandma has decided she's not going to do everything they tell her to anymore. Jessica stood up abruptly. Don't put strange ideas in his head, Eleanor. Strange ideas? Like what? Like it's okay to be selfish. Like it's okay not to listen to your family when they're trying to help you. I rose slowly, looking at the woman who had treated me like a second-class employee for years. Jessica, you've never worked a day in your life. You live in a condo I paid for. Your son goes to a school I pay for. Your vacations are paid for by me. I don't think you have the moral authority to talk to me about selfishness. Her face went from white to red. How dare you? I take care of your grandson. I'm the one who gets up every night when he's sick, which is your job as a mother. A job I also did, without anyone paying me for it. Ryan stood up, clearly uncomfortable with the clash between his mother and his wife. Mom, this isn't getting us anywhere. We just want what's best for you. No, I said, feeling a crystal clarity in my mind. You want what's best for you, and that's fine. You have the right to want to prosper, to seek your future, but you don't have the right to build it on my ruins. Alex clung to my skirt, sensing the tension even if he didn't fully understand it. Grandma, can I stay with you tonight? The silence that followed his question was devastating. Jessica grabbed his arm with more force than necessary. No, Alex. We're going home. But I want to stay with Grandma. I said no. As Jessica dragged my grandson toward the door, he looked back at me over his shoulder with sad eyes. It was the first time he had asked to stay with me, the first time he seemed to prefer my company to his parents. And it was also the first time they had explicitly forbidden me from seeing him. When they left, only Tom and I remained in the kitchen. He poured himself a glass of water from the tap and drank it slowly, as if making a decision. Mom, I'm going to give you one last chance, he said finally. Tomorrow I'm coming back with Arthur. You're going to sign those papers. You're going to move into a nice facility in the Bay Area, and we're all going to be happy. And if I don't? His smile was the coldest thing I had ever seen. Then we'll have to explore other alternatives. That night, after Tom left, I sat on the patio with a cup of chamomile tea. The full moon illuminated the vines, and the air smelled of jasmine and damp earth. For the first time in decades, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt full of possibility. I woke before dawn with a mental clarity I hadn't felt in years. It was as if my brain had been rearranging the pieces of a puzzle all night, and it was finally starting to make sense. I got up without the usual weight on my shoulders, made my coffee in the quiet kitchen, and for the first time in decades, my first thought wasn't about what my children would need that day. At 7 a.m., I called the Bank of America in town and made an appointment with the manager. At 8, I called the law firm of Martinez and Associates, the same one that had handled my father's legal affairs. At 9, I dialed the number of my cousin Hope in Oregon, the only person in my family who had always spoken to me with kindness and respect. Ellie, what a wonderful surprise, Hope said in the cheerful voice she still had at 68. How are you, cousin? Hope, I need to ask you something important. Do you think I'm senile? She laughed heartily on the other end. Senile? Ellie, you've got a clearer head than me and every other woman our age I know. Why would you ask that? I told her everything. Every detail of the meeting with Arthur, every venomous word from my sons, every threat disguised as concern. Hope listened in silence, and when I finished, she sighed deeply. Oh, my dear cousin, it hurts me to hear this, but it doesn't surprise me. I'd noticed strange things at family gatherings. The way they talked to you, how they'd ignore you when you said something important. Really? Ellie, last year, at your nephew Michael's wedding, Tom spent the whole party telling people you couldn't handle the farm anymore, that he and his brother had to take care of the poor old thing. I wanted to say something, but I thought maybe it was just a young man's arrogance. Arrogance. Such a mild word for betrayal. At 10 a.m., I was sitting across from Michael Martinez, the son of the lawyer who had represented my family for 40 years. He was a man in his 50s, with graying temples and a calm way of speaking that inspired confidence. Mrs. Miller, I've reviewed all the documents you brought. Your legal situation is very clear. You are the sole proprietor of the land, you have no significant outstanding debts, and you are in full possession of your mental faculties. He showed me a folder he had prepared while I waited. I've consulted with a forensic expert who can certify your mental capacity if necessary. I've also reviewed the latest appraisals of your property. Did you know that your 20 acres, according to the updated county records, are worth between $6 and $7 million? My breath caught in my throat. $6 million? At a minimum. Your land is in an area the state of California has designated a prime viticultural and tourist area. There are international companies that would pay that much for the land alone, not including the equipment or the family brand. Tom knew. Of course he knew. And he had offered me $1,500 a month as if he were doing me a favor. What can I do to protect myself? I asked. Several things. First, we're going to change all your bank passwords and open a new account that only you can access. Second, we're going to draft a will that reflects your exact wishes, not what others think they should be. And third, we're going to establish a very specific power of attorney that prevents anyone from making decisions for you without a court order. For the first time in months, I felt hope. At 2 p.m., I left the bank with a new debit card and a new account where I had transferred all my savings. $800 I'd managed to scrape together selling olives at the Sunday market. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Completely mine. I walked through town feeling as if I were discovering it for the first time. I stopped in front of a boutique window and saw my reflection. I was wearing the same navy blue dress I'd worn for special occasions for the last 5 years. The black shoes I'd bought when my husband died. The brown purse that had been a gift from Jessica 3 Christmases ago. A purse I now realized she had chosen. Not me. I went into the store. The clerk, a young woman with curly hair and a kind smile, approached me. "Good morning, ma'am. Can I help you with anything? I want to buy myself something nice. Something I like." I tried on an olive green dress that brought out my eyes, a white cotton blouse that made me look younger, a skirt with a small floral print I never would have dared to wear because Tom always said, older women should dress more soberly. I paid with my new card, feeling a strange thrill each time I entered my PIN, my code, my numbers, my decision. When I got home that afternoon, I found 3 missed calls from Tom on the landline. I didn't call back. Instead, I put on my new green dress, made myself a real dinner, a Spanish omelet, gazpacho, and some prosciutto I'd bought without looking at the price, and sat on the patio to eat while watching the sunset. The phone rang at 8 p.m. "Mom, where have you been?" "I've been calling you all afternoon." "I've been busy," I said, surprised at how calm my voice sounded. "Busy? Doing what?" "My own things." There was a silence on the other end of the line. "Look, Mom, I talked to Arthur. He's willing to improve the offer. $1,800 a month, and he'll pay for the first year of the facility up front. I'm not interested." "What do you mean you're not interested?" "It's an excellent offer. More than you deserve, to be honest." "Tom, don't call me about this again. I've made my decision." "Your decision means nothing, Mom. Tomorrow, we're starting the process to have you declared incompetent. We have witnesses to your erratic behavior, your irrational refusal to accept help." I felt a pang of fear, but this time it didn't paralyze me. "Do what you want. But I've taken my own steps." "What steps?" "That's none of your business." I hung up the phone. And for the first time in 30 years, I hung up without feeling guilty. That night I slept deeply, without waking every hour wondering if I'd done something wrong, if I'd hurt someone's feelings, if I should have said yes instead of no. I dreamed of my father, young and strong, teaching me to prune the vines. "Look, Ellie," he said in the dream, "you have to cut off the sick branches, even if it hurts. If you don't, they'll poison the whole plant." The next day, as I ate breakfast in my kitchen dressed in my new blouse, I heard a car in the driveway. It was Ryan, with Jessica and Alex. My heart leaped at the sight of my grandson, but I held my ground as Jessica walked toward me with the fake smile she used when she wanted something. "Eleanor, we've come to get the boy's things." "What things?" "His toys here, the clothes you bought him, his books. We've decided it's best he doesn't come over for a while, until you stabilize." Alex looked at me with sad eyes. "Grandma, can't I come see you anymore?" Jessica took his hand firmly. "It's temporary, Alex. Grandma needs to rest." "But I don't want her to rest. I want to play with her." I felt my heart breaking, but I also felt a fury I had never known. "Jessica, Alex is my grandson. You have no right to forbid me from seeing him." "I have every right. I'm his mother, and I'm his grandmother. You're his grandmother as long as you can prove you can take care of yourself. Until then, I'm sorry, but we have to protect him." "Protect him from what? My love?" "From your unpredictable behavior." Ryan silently gathered the few toys Alex had at my house. The wooden horse I'd given him for his birthday, the storybooks we read together on Sundays, the toy fire engine he played with in the yard. When they left, I was left alone with a different kind of silence. It wasn't the empty silence of loneliness, but the silence full of possibility of someone who finally has room to breathe. I poured myself a glass of my own wine, the one I'd made following the techniques my father taught me, and raised a toast to the woman I was just beginning to know. Eleanor Miller, 64 years old, owner of $6 million in land, and free, for the first time in decades, to live for herself. The wine was excellent. Sweet, complex, with notes of the earth that gave it life, exactly as it should be. The call came on Friday morning, while I was watering my geraniums on the patio. It was Tom, but his voice sounded different, more controlled, colder, as if he were reading from a script. "Mom, I need you to come to Ryan's house this afternoon. We need to talk as a family." "I have nothing to talk about with you." "Yes, you do. We've made some important decisions about your future, and you have the right to hear them before we put them into action." Something in his tone made my skin crawl. A new confidence, as if he were holding cards I didn't know about. "What kind of decisions?" "Be there at 5. And Mom, bring all the documents for the vineyard. All of them." He hung up before I could reply. I spent the morning with a strange mix of nervousness and determination. I put on my new green dress, did my hair more carefully than usual, and put all the property deeds and the papers from my lawyer, Michael Martinez, into my purse. If they wanted a war, they were going to get one. Ryan's house in Sacramento was an hour's bus ride away. During the trip, I looked out at the fields and wetlands, wondering if this would be the last time I made this journey to see my family. Something told me that after this afternoon, things between us would never be the same. When I arrived, they were all already seated around the dining room table. Tom in his Sunday best, Ryan nervously fiddling with a pen, Jessica with that smile that didn't reach her eyes, and surprisingly, Arthur, the supposed investor, with a thick folder in front of him. There was also someone else I didn't expect. An older man with a gray mustache and glasses, dressed in a dark suit, who introduced himself as Dr. Sebastian Ruiz, geriatric specialist in cognitive decline. My blood ran cold. "Sit down, Mom," Tom said, pointing to the only empty chair, which was conveniently placed facing all of them, as if I were a defendant before a tribunal. "I'd rather stand." "Suit yourself. But this is going to take a while." Jessica cleared her throat and opened a notebook where she had written something in her perfect retired teacher's script. "Eleanor, we've asked Dr. Ruiz to be here because we're concerned about your mental state. Over the last few months, we've documented several incidents of strange behavior." "Strange?" "Yes. For example, last month you yelled at the mailman for no apparent reason. I yelled at him because he deliberately trampled my flowers. He'd done it 3 times already." "You see?" Dr. Ruiz interjected in a condescending voice. "This tendency to justify aggressive behavior with paranoid explanations is typical of early-onset dementia. I'm not paranoid. I have eyes. Jessica continued reading from her list. There was also the incident last week, when you bought new clothes for no special occasion. An impulsive and unnecessary expense. Since when do I need a special occasion to buy myself clothes? Since you're 64 and should be more prudent with your money, Ryan answered. Besides, you changed your bank passwords without consulting us. Consulting you? Mom, we're your children. It's natural for us to be concerned about your financial stability. Arthur leaned forward with that professional smile I now knew so well. Mrs. Miller, we understand your resistance. But you have to see that your sons only want what's best for you. They came to me because they know I can offer a solution that benefits everyone. I took the folder of documents from my purse and placed it on the table with more force than necessary. Benefit everyone? Mr. Vance, do you have any idea what my land is actually worth? For the first time, I saw a flicker of discomfort in his eyes. Well, appraisals can vary. $6 million, at a minimum, and you offered me $1,500 a month. A tense silence fell. Tom shifted in his chair. Mom, those are numbers on paper. The reality is different. The reality is that the three of you thought I was so stupid I would give away $6 million for a pittance. Dr. Ruiz coughed softly. Mrs. Miller, this obsession with money is also a troubling symptom. People with cognitive decline often develop grandiose ideas about their possessions. I turned to him, feeling rage rise from my stomach to my throat. Doctor, have you ever actually examined my mental faculties? It wasn't necessary. Your sons provided me with sufficient information about your state. Their information? And doesn't it strike you as odd that the two men who stand to benefit financially from my supposed incompetence are the ones reporting it? The doctor adjusted his glasses, clearly uncomfortable. Close family members are usually the first to detect these problems. Doctor, I cut him off. Did you know that until a week ago I didn't even know you existed? Do you know that my sons brought you here under false pretenses? Do you know they have been draining my bank accounts for years while I single-handedly maintained a 20-acre agricultural operation? Jessica piped up, her voice shrill. Eleanor, that's not true. We never forced you to give us money. I opened my folder and took out a sheet my lawyer had prepared. No? I have here a record of every loan and gift I've given you over the last 10 years. $143,000. How much have you paid back? 0. I placed the paper on the table. They all stared at the numbers in silence. Furthermore, I continued, I have here a psychological evaluation I had done yesterday with Dr. Patricia Moreno, a board-certified neuropsychologist. Do you know what it says? That I have my mental faculties fully intact and a memory that is exceptional for my age. I took out the second document and placed it next to the first. I also have here an expert appraisal valuing my land at $6,400,000. And here, a copy of the contract you wanted me to sign, which clearly states that Mr. Vance would take 90% of the profits from my life's work. The silence was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Tom was the first to react. He shot to his feet, his face red with fury. That's enough! Mom, this is ridiculous! We're your family! No, I said with a calm that surprised me. Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't lie. Family doesn't threaten to lock their elders in a home to get their money. It's not your money. It's our family legacy. Our legacy? When was the last time you set foot on the vineyard to work? When did you get up at 5 a.m. to prune? When have you ever cried watching a drought wipe out an entire harvest? That doesn't matter. We're your heirs. Heirs. What an ugly word coming from someone who can't wait for you to die to collect. Jessica stood up too, trembling with indignation. Eleanor, you're talking like a crazy person. Of course we want you to live for many more years. Really? Because what you want is for me to sign a piece of paper that gives you my land while I'm alive, and for me to go to a home where I won't bother anyone until I die. That's not exactly the same thing. Ryan, who had been quiet, finally spoke, his voice trembling. Mom, we just want to take care of you. I walked over to him and put my hand on his shoulder. For a moment, I saw the boy he had been, the shy teenager who asked me for advice about girls, the young man who cried in my arms when his father died. Ryan, my son, if you really wanted to take care of me, you would have asked me what I needed. You would have visited when I was sick. You would have called me on my birthday. You would have let your son truly know me. not just as the grandma who pays his school fees. His eyes filled with tears, but he said nothing. I turned to Arthur, who looked like he was trying to find a way to escape the situation. "And you, Mr. Vance? Do you know what it's like to work the land? Do you know what it's like to watch something grow with your own two hands?" "Mrs. Miller, this is getting out of hand." "It's not getting out of anything. It's landing exactly where it should be, because I have decided to sell my vineyard." The silence was absolute. "But I'm not selling it to you." I pulled the last document from my folder. "Yesterday, I signed a preliminary contract with Heritage Oak Vineyards, a family-owned company from Oregon that's been making artisanal wine for 4 generations. They're paying me $6,100,000 in cash, no partners, no conditions. And best of all, they're going to keep the name Eleanor Miller Vineyards on every label, forever." Tom lunged toward me, but I had already put the papers back in my purse. "You can't do that. We're your sons. We have rights. You have the right to inherit whatever I choose to leave you. And right now, that is exactly nothing." I walked out of the house slowly, my back straight and my head held high. Behind me, I heard shouting, arguments, the sound of chairs tipping over. But I didn't turn back. Out on the street, I took a deep breath of the Sacramento air and smiled for the first time in months. The first night after the sale, I slept for 12 straight hours. I didn't wake up once thinking about what my sons would say, or worrying if I had hurt their feelings, or planning how to fix a relationship that had been broken for years. I woke up with the sun streaming through my bedroom window, and for the first time in decades, my first thought wasn't for others. It was for me. What do I want for breakfast today? Such a simple question, but one I hadn't asked myself in years. I'd always eaten whatever was left in the fridge, whatever was cheapest, whatever I could afford after sending money to my sons. That morning, I made myself pancakes with maple syrup, freshly ground coffee, and fresh squeezed orange juice. I sat on the patio, looking at my vines one last time as their owner, and felt something like peace. The phone had rung 17 times since the night before. I hadn't answered it once. At 10 in the morning, the team from Heritage Oak Vineyards arrived for the final property assessment. 3 people came. Mr. Fernando Aguilar, the owner, a man in his 70s with a worker's hands and kind eyes. His daughter Maria, a certified enologist who spoke about the vines with the same affection I had for 40 years. And Jose, the foreman, who had worked vineyards his whole life and understood the value of tradition. "Mrs. Miller," Mr. Aguilar said as we walked between the rows of vines, "I want you to know that for us, this isn't just a purchase. It's adopting a family." "A family?" "These vines, this land, the way you've cared for them, all of that is part of who we are now, and we want you to know that you will always have a place here, whenever you want to visit." For the first time in days, my eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of gratitude. Maria came over to me with a smile that reminded me of my own when I was young and had dreams. "Mrs. Miller, my father told me you learned winemaking from your own father. I would love for you to tell me about your techniques someday. The traditional methods you use are exactly what we value." "Really?" "Of course. Industrial wine can be made anywhere in the world. But wine with a soul, wine with a history, that's only made with knowledge passed down from generation to generation. You have that knowledge." That afternoon, after the team from the winery left, I sat down to do something I'd been putting off for years. Think about myself, about what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, what would make me happy, who I was when I wasn't defined by my sacrifices for others. I took out a notebook I'd bought years ago to track vineyard expenses but had never used. On the first page, I wrote, "Eleanor Miller, 64 years old. What do you want to do with your new life?" Beneath it, I started a list. Travel to places I've only seen on television. Learn to paint landscapes like I've always wanted. Get a small dog that will sleep with me in bed. Buy new books, not secondhand ones. Eat in restaurants without looking at the prices. See the ocean from a boat, not just the shore. Have real friends, not just town acquaintances. Sleep in late without feeling guilty. Buy fresh flowers for my house every week. Learn Italian to understand the operas I love. With every line I wrote, I felt like I was waking up parts of myself that had been dormant for decades. There was an Eleanor buried under years of responsibilities and sacrifices, and that Eleanor had her own tastes, desires, and dreams. The next day, I went to a travel agency in downtown Sonoma. The young woman who helped me, Rachel, was the age my daughter might have been, if I'd had one. "Where would you like to go, ma'am?" "To Italy," I said without hesitating. "I want to see Tuscany, Rome, Venice. I want to eat real pasta and drink Italian wine while watching the sunset." "How wonderful! Are you going with your husband? With family?" "I'm going alone. And I can't wait." Rachel looked at me with a mix of respect and envy. "Ma'am, I wish I had your courage. To travel alone at 64, that's admirable." "Courage? Honey, courage is what it took to get me here. What I'm about to do is pure pleasure." I booked 3 weeks in Italy for the following month. Nice hotels, not cheap motels. Guided tours, not public buses and maps. Recommended restaurants, not sandwiches from a grocery store. For the first time in my life, I was going to travel the way I deserved. That same afternoon, I went to Nordstrom in San Francisco. It had been years since I'd set foot in a department store. I always shopped at small stores where everything was cheaper but less beautiful. I tried on colorful dresses I'd never dared to wear, comfortable but elegant shoes, and accessories that made me feel feminine. At the perfume counter, a sales associate helped me choose a new fragrance. "What kind of scent do you like, ma'am?" "I don't know. I've worn the same perfume for 20 years. It was the one my husband liked." "I understand." "And what do you like now?" Now I like things that smell like freedom." She laughed softly and showed me several bottles. I chose one that smelled of orange blossoms and the sea, as fresh and joyful as I felt inside. On the way home, I stopped at a bookstore. I bought 3 novels that had good reviews, an Italian art book to prepare for my trip, and a guide on how to start painting. The clerk asked if I wanted them shipped. "No, I'll take them now. I'm eager to start reading." That night, as I was eating the paella I'd bought from the best restaurant in town, the doorbell rang. It was my neighbor Diane, a woman my age who had always been kind, but with whom I'd never had time to build a real friendship. "Eleanor, sorry to come by so late, but I saw lights on and wanted to make sure you were okay. There have been a lot of cars here these past few days, and your son Tom has been asking all the neighbors about you." "I'm perfectly fine, Diane. Better than ever, in fact." "I'm glad. And if you don't mind my asking, is it true you sold the vineyard?" "It's true." Diane looked at me with curiosity, but not judgment. "That must have been a difficult decision, the easiest one I've made in years. Can I ask why?" I invited her in and poured her a glass of wine from my last harvest. I told her everything. Not the sordid details of my son's betrayal, but the liberating part. How I had discovered I had the right to live for myself. How I had decided that the last years of my life were going to be the best. "Eleanor," she said when I finished, "I've been married for 40 years to a man who doesn't value me, taking care of adult children who treat me like a maid, never doing anything that truly makes me happy. And I'm 62. And, do you think it's too late to start over?" I took her hand across the table. "Diane, it's never too late to be happy. It's never too late to put yourself first." That night, Diane stayed until 2 in the morning. We talked about things we'd never shared with anyone. Our youthful dreams, our fears, our disappointments, but also our hopes. For the first time in years, I had a real conversation with another woman. A conversation where we didn't talk about family problems or health or money, but about what made us feel alive. When she left, I stood on the patio, breathing in the night air. The stars seemed brighter than usual. Or maybe I was just seeing them with different eyes. Tomorrow, my new life would truly begin. And for the first time in decades, I was excited to see what the new day would bring. The phone still rang from time to time, but I had learned something valuable. Not being available to everyone all the time doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a person who respects herself. And that person, Eleanor Miller, newly born at 64, had many exciting things to do. 6 months after that afternoon in Sacramento, I was sitting at a small cafe terrace in Florence, savoring a cappuccino that tasted exactly as I had imagined for years. The October sun warmed my face, and I was wearing a turquoise blue dress I had bought that morning in a boutique on the Ponte Vecchio. Next to me, on a wicker chair, rested my new travel companion, a small watercolor sketchbook where I'd begun to paint the landscapes I saw. I wasn't very good yet, but it didn't matter. Every brushstroke was mine, every color chosen by my own taste, every line a declaration that Eleanor Miller had the right to create beauty, even if it wasn't perfect. My new smartphone, which I'd learned to use with the patience of someone who finally has time for new things, vibrated softly. It was a text from Hope, my cousin in Oregon. "Ellie, I saw the photos you sent from Rome. You look so beautiful, so happy. You've inspired me. Manuel and I are separating after 30 years. It's time for me to live, too." I smiled as I typed my reply. "Hope, it's never too late to be brave. I love you." There were more messages. Diane, my neighbor, sent me photos from the dance classes she'd started after filing for divorce. "Eleanor, you were right. At 62, I've discovered I love salsa dancing. Who would have guessed?" There was also a message from Maria, the enologist from Heritage Oak Vineyards. "Mrs. Miller, we've bottled the first wine from your harvest's grapes. The label looks beautiful. Eleanor Miller Vineyards, a tradition since 1968. Would it be okay if we sent a few bottles to you in Italy?" Of course it was okay. In fact, it moved me to think that the work of 3 generations of my family would live on, but now in the hands of people who truly valued it. There were no messages from Tom or Ryan. I hadn't heard from them in 4 months, not since my lawyer officially informed them that I had sold the property and that they would receive no inheritance as long as they maintained their attitude. At first, that absence had hurt, but over time, I had learned to see the silence as a gift. The silence meant no drama, no requests for money disguised as family emergencies, no emotional manipulation. The silence meant peace. There was a single exception to that family silence. 3 weeks ago, while visiting the Bobbly Gardens in Florence, I had received a call from an unknown number. It was Jessica, Ryan's wife, but her voice sounded different. Smaller, more human. "Eleanor, it's Jessica. I know I have no right to call you after everything that happened. But what, Jessica? It's Alex. He's been asking for you constantly. He says he wants to see his grandma, Ellie, that he misses the stories you used to tell him." My heart had clenched hearing that. "And what have you told him?" "At first, we told him you were sick, that you couldn't have visitors. But he's so smart, Eleanor. He started asking why he can never call you, why he can't send you drawings like he does with my parents." She paused for a long moment before continuing. "Eleanor, I've realized I was wrong. So wrong. I used my son as a weapon against you, and that's unforgivable. Jessica." "No, let me finish. I've had months to think about what happened, and I realized I made Alex an accomplice to something ugly instead of teaching him to love his grandmother. That's not what I want for him." "What are you asking me?" "I'm asking that when you come back from Italy, you give your grandson a chance. Not us, him. He's not to blame for his parents' mistakes." I had agreed. Not for Jessica, not for Ryan, but for that 5-year-old boy who had inherited my dark eyes and deserved to know his real grandmother, not the manipulated version his parents had presented. Now, as I finished my Florentine cappuccino, I thought about the conversation I would have with Alex when I returned to the States in 2 weeks. I would tell him about the piazzas of Italy, about the pistachio gelato I'd tasted, about the pigeons in St. Mark's Square that would land on your hand if you were patient, and maybe, if he wanted, I could teach him to paint with watercolors like I was learning. The difference was that this time, our relationship would be on my terms. We would see each other when I could and wanted to, not when it was convenient for his parents. He would come to my new home, a small but bright condo I'd bought in downtown Sonoma, and we would have quality time without rush or hidden agendas. My new home was everything the old one hadn't been. Completely mine. Every piece of furniture chosen by me. Every painting hung where I liked it. Every plant placed where it got the light it needed. There were no family photos on the walls. No memories of times when I had been less happy. There was only the present and the future. At sunset, I walked through the cobblestone streets of Florence toward my hotel. I was staying in a 15th century palazzo converted into a boutique hotel with frescoed ceilings and windows overlooking the Arno River. It was expensive, yes, but I had learned that money unspent is useless, And spending money on things that make you happy isn't a whim. It's an investment in your own soul. In my room, while organizing my day's watercolors, I reflected on how much had changed in these months. It wasn't just that I had money, though financial freedom had been fundamental to everything else. It was that I had reclaimed my dignity, my voice, my right to say no without explanation. I had learned that true love doesn't demand constant sacrifice. True love celebrates your happiness. It doesn't see it as a threat to its own interests. I had learned that being a mother didn't mean being a slave, that giving life to someone didn't make me their eternal debtor. But above all, I had learned that it is never, ever too late to start over. I remembered a conversation I'd had a month earlier with an Argentine woman on a train from Rome to Naples. She was 71 and traveling through Europe alone after divorcing a husband who had belittled her for 40 years. "Aren't you scared, traveling alone at our age?" a younger tourist in our compartment had asked. The Argentine woman had laughed heartily. "Honey, at our age, the only thing to be afraid of is realizing you've wasted decades of your life trying to make people happy who didn't know how to value you. Once you get over that fear, the rest is just an adventure." She was right. What I had experienced with my sons hadn't been filial love. It had been emotional and financial exploitation, disguised as family obligation. Real love doesn't humiliate, blackmail, or threaten. Real love celebrates your well-being. It doesn't see it as an obstacle to its own plans. That night, from my Florentine balcony, I called Diane to tell her about my return plans. "Eleanor, you have no idea how excited I am that you're coming back. I want to introduce you to the friends I've made in my dance class. They're all women who, like us, have decided it's time to live. You know what, Diane? I think we're going to form a great group." "A group of what?" "A group of women who have realized their lives belong to them." After hanging up, I poured myself a glass of wine I'd brought from the States. Not my own, but from a Napa Valley winery I had discovered by chance and loved. I made a silent toast to the woman I had been, the one who had endured 30 years of emotional exploitation, believing it was love. And I also toasted the woman I was now, free, dignified, and ready to squeeze every last drop of happiness from the life she had left. Tomorrow I would fly back to the States. I would return home, but not as the same woman who had left. I was returning as Eleanor Miller, 64 years old, owner of her own life and her own future. And that, after everything I had been through, was the best gift she could ever give herself. Have you ever been in a similar situation, or do you know someone who has had to choose between their own dignity and family expectations? Tell me about it in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel so this message can reach someone who needs to hear it.